Let's bring in now Sky News host James Morrow. James, the Prime Minister is, of course, embarking on an international diplomacy tour. He's starting with the US, where he landed earlier today, our time. Then he's going to head to China, the Pacific Islands. Peter Dutton has called for him to visit Israel. At the moment, that's not on his agenda. And yet we've seen that the German Chancellor has visited Israel, Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni, and Emmanuel Macron and the Dutch Prime Minister are still going to visit. James, what do you think about this? Should Albanese be going to Israel in a show of support? And does the fact that he probably can't, does this show that the left faction of his party is dictating foreign policy?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question there, Sherry. Yes, absolutely, he should go. He should. If all of these other leaders are making a support, it's incumbent upon Anthony Albanese, who represents a country with a significant Jewish population that did so much after World War II to resettle Jews displaced by the Holocaust and Nazi atrocities, to go and stand with Israel. Standing with Israel is standing with civilization. It's very simple. And I think anybody who doesn't get that has a very big problem. And the problem Anthony Albanese has is that Labour now has been dominated by people on the left who have, let's just say, a very problematic relationship with Israel. I think Bill Shorten may be the only person on the front benches there who's really quite sound on the topic. But, you know, we've seen two ministers, one in cabinet, break from the solidarity on the subject of Israel. But, you know, there's a much bigger issue here. And as I said, standing with Israel is to stand with civilization. There's no other way to talk about it when you're talking about the butchery of Hamas, which wants to eliminate Israel, eliminate worldwide Judaism according to their charter. When people tell you who they are, believe them. That's what I always say. And that is the fact that the left has become so infected, and this has been going on, by the way, for decades. You can trace it back to the 60s, has been so infected with this sort of self-abasing, self-hating ideology that says any sort of decolonizing imperative, no matter how violent, how disgraceful it behaves, must somehow be celebrated. And that is, I think, an intellectual fight that we need to have here in the universities, in the schools, on our campuses, sadly in our corporations, on our streets, in our societies. Because until we, you know, deal with that, we're going to keep seeing people doing this sort of moral both-sidism and worse when it comes to Israel.
No, I completely agree with you, James. We are seeing this bizarre equivalence between a terror organisation and Israel. Now, James, support for Labor has fallen in Victoria and Western Australia, according to today's news poll in The Australian. It shows that male and younger voters nationally are also turning away from the ALP. Although Labor does still lead the coalition in two-party preferred support, the margin has narrowed, though, 54 to 46 compared to 6 months ago. It was 58 to 42. What do you make of these news poll results today?
Yeah, well, a couple of more interesting things, too, in that. Number one, the fact that Labor is really on the nose with the Greens in a lot of areas. And so this we see a real pincer movement forming. You know, you've got the Liberals on one side and the Greens on the other. The Greens, and again, this kind of goes back to your previous question, too. The Greens in inner city areas are really giving them a run for their money. And I think they're very concerned about that. That's what's sort of dragging them to the left. The other interesting thing to me is that bit you mentioned about younger people and men sliding away from Labor. To me, this is mimicking the same shift away from the Yes campaign that we saw during the referendum. And I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see other demographics start to fall in that direction as well.
James, just finally, today we saw the transcript from that police body cam footage released. Just to remind everyone, this is about Claire Noland. She was the frail 95-year-old who was suffering from dementia. She was in a nursing home when police tasered her and she died. The transcript from that body cam footage today released. One of the officers involved, Senior Constable Christian White, reportedly said, "We're not playing this game, Claire. You're going to put that down." Just remember, this is a 95-year-old weighing 45 kilograms that he was speaking to. She was holding a knife. He said, "This is your first warning. You see this? This is a taser. Drop it now. Stop now. Don't think I'm going to give you another warning." I mean, she had dementia. Less than a minute later, James, it's alleged that White then says, nah, bugger it, bugger it. And then he fires the taser less than 2 metres away at Claire. She then fell from her walker, hit her head, and she died. James, understandably, the family is suing the state for negligence.
Yeah, look, and you can see why. I mean, it sounds just on the face of it pretty shocking right there. It's quite interesting, of course, you contrast the behavior of the police there when dealing with a 45-kilogram, 95-year-old dementia patient and the way they dealt with protesters at the Opera House the other night. One common thread, of course, in both those stories is Police Minister Yasmin Catley, who mishandled the Claire Nolan story terribly. I think has also performed terribly during these protests we've had in Sydney. I really am surprised that Chris Minns hasn't given her her marching orders yet.
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of scandals piling up against Yasmin Catley, the Police Minister in New South Wales, so you think that she won't be... How long can she hang on in the job? James Murray, thank you so much.